Good morning. I'm Ronnie Eldridge. I'm the director of the Division for Women. We have here today the Working Coalition. Maureen Grinnan, the newly elected chair of the New York State Women's Political Caucus, is going to be the spokesperson. But before we start, I thought, and the governor, come up, please.
Did you introduce that clearly and all of the
No,
mayor?
how do you do it, sir?
We're not
We
alone.
thought we would have everybody introduce themselves, if you would, please. All right?
I'm Maureen Grinnan, the state chair for the National Women's Political Caucus.
Madeline Cochin, New York Civil Liberties Union.
Eleanor Ivory, New York State Council of Churches.
Maxine Gorham, Legislative Chair, State AAUW, American Association of University Women.
Meg O'Regan, Center for Women's Rights.
Louise Stoney, Legislative Director, Assembly Task Force on Women's Issues.
Chris Toffmeyer, New York State Nurses Association.
Shirley Gordon, Family Planning Advocates of New York State.
Joan McKinley, New York State League of Women Voters.
Leslie Loring, the American Jewish Committee.
Edwina Winslow, the New York State Girl Scout Councils.
Carol Reichert, Family Planning Advocates.
Carol Smith, National Association of Social Workers, New York State Chapter.
Ed Cleary, New York State AFL-CIO.
Pat Koenig, New York State United Teachers.
Norman Adler, District Council 37, AFSCME.
Richard Winston, New York State AFL-CIO.
Arthur Malkin, NYPIRG.
Pat Stryker, United Federation of Teachers, Coalition of Labor Union Women.
Hope Geisler, Student Association of State University.
Barbara Bartoletti, Director, Women's Issues, New York State League of Women Voters.
Maud Easter, lobbyist for NOW New York State, the National Organization for Women.
Thank you very much. Maureen, do you want to make your statement first on behalf of this working group?
The working group for the ERA is pleased that the governor is taking the lead in this effort to dislodge the ERA from the Republican conference in the Senate. This group, representing a constituency of 5.5 million voters, has convened today because the ERA and its fate in the legislative session is a major issue for all of us. The message must get out that 74.7% of New York State voters favor the ERA. The voters of New York State should not be denied the right to vote on this issue. There are many men and women of good conscience who would vote for the ERA when it reaches the floor of the Senate. All recent polls demonstrate the overwhelming support for this issue. In your packet, you will find copies of a recent Marist poll, which shows that Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, independents, Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, upstaters and downstaters alike, favor the ERA. This is why the ERA must be passed this session. We are not asking the Senate to place the ERA into the state's constitution. We are only asking that the Senate, our elected representatives, let the people exercise our right to vote on this very important issue. The wishes of almost 75% of the people of New York State should not be cast aside because of the political worries of the Republican conference. If the Republican conference does not let the issue come to the Senate floor, the voters of New York will be denied their right to decide until the end of the decade, or maybe forever. Despite the Senate Republicans' reluctance to let the people decide, the ERA is not dead yet. We, the working group for the ERA, and our 5.5 million voters are confident that the people of this state make their views known to their senators and will force them to bring this out of the Republican conference. The Republicans have said that they have not heard from us, and this is not true. Thousands of phone calls, letters, and telegrams have streamed into the offices of the Republican senators from all over the state. Our voices are rising, and the Republican conference must not ignore the people's wish to vote on the state ERA. With the Senate coming back next week, this coalition and the millions of men and women across the state who want the ERA put to the people will continue our drive. And we will continue to let them know that we want the Senate Republicans to bring the resolution to the floor for a vote. We urge the people across the state to continue to express their views and their outrage at the Senate's refusal to even consider this issue. And this is in derogation of our democratic tradition. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, I would like you to.
There's not a great deal I can add, except to say I discussed the subject this morning with Senator Anderson. I apologize for my tardiness here. The leadership breakfast this morning went longer than I expected it to. My own emphasis, as you know, has been on the fact that what is being asked for is very, very simple, and that is an opportunity to vote. As has been pointed out, the most egregious part of what's happened is that we are suggesting to the people of the state and the people of the country that this progressive state, this great center of thought and outreach in the United States, is not capable. We're afraid to discuss this issue and to take a vote on it. That's very, very difficult to understand and to sell, and that's what I said to Senator Anderson today. I said we have until 90 days before the election to have a resolution passed by the Senate and the Assembly. There's time to do that. I suggested to Senator Anderson that some of the Republicans had indicated they hadn't heard from the women and from me. I thought that was odd, but whatever, we could take care of that between now and Monday, for sure, and that we would start with our effort immediately after the leaders' meeting. This is the beginning of the new effort to erase that impediment, that failure on our part to sufficiently enlighten the Republicans as to our wishes. I told the senator that we thought the best way to do it would be to go directly to the Republicans in the conference. The senator has no objection to that at all. He thought it would be a useful demonstration of the democratic small d process at work. So we're going to be going to every Republican senator we can and seeing if we can't answer their questions and importune them one more time, simply to let this come to the floor, take a vote. If you think the ERA is dangerous in its present form and you want to add an amendment, so propose an amendment and vote on it. Let the people know where you are. I think it would be terribly wrong if the constituency is demanding expression and ventilation on this issue to say we can't do it because we may have to pay a political price to a small group of radical right political people called the Conservative Party. I think that would be wrong and not fair to the rest of us. Now, 73 or so % of the people want the ERA. I'm sure that's true. I will tell you myself, that is not the ultimate criterion, nor should it be, and I'm sure it's not for any of the people in this group. We don't do things by polls. It is interesting to know that so many people favor at least a discussion of this issue, and I think it's relevant. I wouldn't want you to get the feeling that I or any of us, I think, if I'm free to speak for them, are saying every time you get a majority view in a poll, then that ought to be the law. We're not saying that at all. But it is relevant. Certainly if you're going to make this a political argument, certainly if you're a Republican senator who is thinking about how it's going to cut politically, it's relevant to know that while that conservative leader may be telling you your line is in trouble, you'd better remember that there are a whole lot of voters out there saying your life as a senator may be in trouble. And to that extent, I think it's relevant. We didn't bring up the subject of politics. They did. So we go from here to a continuing dialogue with the Senate. The Assembly's no problem, obviously. They're just waiting for the Senate to act. One final point that hasn't been developed sufficiently. For those people who have political reservations, they don't lose their options by putting this matter on the floor for discussion, even by its passage. There would be no loss of options for those people who want eventually to stop the ERA. They'll have next year to do that. Remember how it works. 2 years it takes. In this case, this year and the first year of a new session, new legislative body next year. You can pass it this year, at least let it get voted on, if it passes, and if your fears about hookups with abortion or whatever else, if they've been proven out, and remember that case in Pennsylvania that started all the trouble is working its way up the ladder. If they prove out by next year, you'll have a stronger argument next year, and you can kill it next year. You have 2 chances to stop us. You don't lose the chance by letting debate go forward this year. And that's a good, pragmatic consideration, I think, for those people who have a political problem in dealing with this. There is unanimity in this group, I know, because I met with them yesterday. And this is not an easy group to get unanimity in, but there's unanimity in this group on this issue. And I think it is an intelligent and persuasive, eventually will be a persuasive representation of the thought in this state, and I expect to be successful. Okay?
though, between the time that you proposed this in your State of the State and the announcement by Senator Anderson that the conference was not going to let this on the floor, the administration did no lobbying on the issue at all. My question is, isn't this press conference a little bit late?
No. Why? No. We did a lot of lobbying. I don't think I ever missed a chance to speak. If you had come to any of the forums, I didn't notice your presence, Adam, but if you had been there, at each of the forums we made a point of the ERA. We never missed. Now, what happened was the leaders said, no problem, it's going to get passed. Warren said, I'm for it, always have been for it, I don't see any problem. Stanley said the same thing. When they say there's no problem, you don't go lobby their members. I'm not blaming them. Senator Anderson has not changed his mind. He's still for it. What happened is he ran into a problem he didn't expect in his own conference, and he's frank to admit that.
But the senator is now encouraging you to lobby within his conference.
I'm sorry?
The senator is now encouraging you to lobby within his conference.
No, not encouraging me. I said to the senator this morning that we were going to have this press conference, and that what we thought had to be done is to go directly to the senators, and I hope he would understand that and not mind it. He says, you're free to do that. No, it didn't encourage him. I don't want you to think, Peg, that he said, why don't you go harass my people? Not at all.
Did he give you any assurances that he would put it back on the table in the conference?
No, I'll be precise about that, too. He said, Governor, there's no point in asking me to put it back. My conference is against it. If my conference indicates, or a respectable number of them indicates that they think there's some point to bringing it back, then I'll do it. Don't ask me to do it, because that would be a frustration of their expressed intent. He didn't use exactly those words, but that's what he was saying, and I understand that. So what you need to do, you need to get the conference, or a sufficient number of them, and we're not talking about a lot of people, to change their minds and go to Warren and say, hey, maybe we're right. Maybe the governor did fail to make this clear. You know, he was distracted by national ambition. But now that he's come back to earth and explained to us what the situation, now we understand. So blame the governor for the tardiness and let's get it done. I'll accept that.
Do you think there's much of a chance that the Senate will take it up before next Wednesday or come back in July to meet that August 1st deadline?
July, come back in July?
Isn't there an August 1st deadline on this, so it would have to be done by next week?
Come back in July is our last choice. It's a possibility, but nobody wants to come back. I'm going to be here in July. It's nice in July when you're alone in August.
What about next week? What are the chances?
There is a chance. Of course there's a chance. We're here because there's a chance. And all it takes is for a handful of them to go to Senator Anderson and say, look, here's the story. The governor or the women, they didn't do it right. They came belatedly. Forgive them their lateness. They've laid it out for it. They're right. And if they had said this in the first place, it wouldn't have had all this trouble, but they'll do it better next time. Let's have a conference. Okay, it's not different. Now, one of those senators, this is not a footnote, this is an important reference. One of those senators who we should be talking to is Senator Douglas Barkley. And I will tell you that he is a Republican, and he is not of my party. But I think he has been an excellent senator, and I learned with regret that he is retiring and will not run again. I'm told he's made that announcement officially, Tim. It had been rumored for some time. I know for a fact that a lot of important Republican leaders asked him to change his mind and to run again, because there is that kind of respect for him, and the respect extends to the Democratic side of the aisle and to the governor, and I wish to make that public. I'm working with him and continue to at Fort Drum and on court merger and a whole variety of things, and he is a loss. He is one of the people we will be talking to about the ERA, and I think it would be perfectly fitting for the senator, who has been a leader for a long time, not the leader, but a leader in the Senate, to take a strong position here and to urge at least here in his last chapter or so, to urge at least a debate on this important issue, and I intend to talk to him personally.
Governor, can we see a lobbying campaign now for ERA, phoning senators, sending letters to the senators from your office?
I don't know how they do it, but however they do it, they're pretty good at it. Whatever they want to do, they should do. Letters, phone calls.
Talk about the conference, the division.
You're going to be calling people like...
Ronnie Eldridge is the director of the women's division, and she knows all about that. Ronnie?
We have been calling and encouraging people to call their senators. We're having a conference at the SUNY campus in Albany starting Saturday at noon that will run through Sunday. It's a conference that had been planned before this, but we expect to have over 300 women from around the state. From the county task force that we had formed earlier in the year, a representative from every county, most every county in the state. We have been in constant touch with them and with women's organizations around the state for many weeks now about lobbying. The Republican senators have been lobbied, as Maureen has said. Certainly the conference will give us an opportunity to develop some strategies and concerted action for next week. In the coalition's packet that they're giving you, they also have included a statement on Republicans for Women's Issues, which you might be interested in seeing, and that group has been very active because they have been dismayed to see the party evidently rejecting their desires in the interim, going more to the conservative element of the party.
Aides be involved in this campaign, your counsel, your secretary, as they were in the drinking age campaign, calling senators repeatedly to make the point, to ask for any questions, to offer more information, making a highly visible campaign from your own media staff and from yourself to push this issue over the weekend?
They'll be active.
How will they be active?
Various ways.
Are they making phone calls?
To those people that
We will.
Yes.
I think the way it has to start is for us to reach the legislators ourselves at least one time and get a clear view of where they are. And then we'll do what we have to do, not to harass them, but to enlighten them.
Who do you mean?
Women's Division, all of our allies here.
I mean, will you be personally making such phone calls?
Yes. The way I'm present here, I'll be present with them.
Phone calls to legislators, not public events.
I just said I'd be talking to Senator Barkley myself. I spoke to Senator Anderson this morning.
This is not comparable to the drinking age campaign?
No.
What's the difference now? You mentioned in the past, you said the difference was that leaders all supported this and you had no right or it was improper for you to go into the conference.
Right.
Now apparently Senator Anderson has given you a green light to do that.
Right.
So what's the difference now?
Well, the difference now is, as you've stated it, we don't need to do anything with the Assembly. The last time I needed to go all across the board because there were no leadership voices. The Speaker has done his job, as usual, effectively. Senator Anderson has indicated we're free to speak to his handful. We're only talking about a handful of senators. The purchase age, we had to get to the public. We had to enlighten the public. We had to reach all the legislature. This is a much narrower problem for us in terms of articulation. You don't have to reach the public. They have been reached by common sense. They're convinced. This is a lot easier. This is just going to a handful of Republicans and saying to them, hey, look, the public knows, we all know, you have a political problem, here's a way out of it for you. Really, it's going to come down to a very simple political judgment.
This isn't a question really of voting up and down. It's allowing something to come to vote. It's an issue that has been with us for so many years, a principle that so many of us believe in, an equality and a constitution, and having a working group and not a legislative committee or a legislative body. There is a substantial difference. I mean,
yeah, and let's recall one of the earliest discussions in this very room on this subject, where the question was asked, Josh, about how much activity this year. I said there'll be practically none. And it's why? I said because the legislature is going to adopt the resolution, and that's that. And then we'll next year have a lot of activity because we'll have to go to the people next year, and that's going to cost money and time and energy and imagination. We'll have to run around because there'll be the plebiscite, the referendum. I said, but this year, there's nothing to do. You recall that. I stood right here and said there's nothing to do because Warren's going to pass it and Stanley's going to pass it, and that's it. It's a non-event this year. Now, nobody jumped up and said, that's not true, you have to lobby. Why? Because we all believed that, including Senator Anderson. Then at the last minute, something went wrong in the Republican conference, and now we have to make a last-minute effort. But this was never anticipated.
the legislators voted 3 times on an ERA, twice for a state ERA and once to ratify the national constitution.
An unrelated question on women. 9 months ago, you signed an executive order saying you wanted to increase the number of women and minorities getting state contracts. According to the people in your office who run that program, it still hasn't been implemented. Why has it taken more than 9 months to implement this program for women and minorities?
I don't understand what hasn't been implemented.
Order 21.
The Office of Contract Compliance has been set up, and if we're talking now about women, there is a set goal in that executive order for the minorities. There was not a set goal for women because there was no central listing of the number of women business owners in the state. The Department of Commerce and the Division for Women are undertaking that study or that compilation of women business owners right now, and as soon as those figures are gotten, there will be a goal. But the groups have been talking to the different commissioners of different departments and have been very active in discussing the processes by which the contracts are awarded, the lists from which to which they mail, and bringing to their attention the women that are interested in that business.
Contractors, they say that the certification process has not been completed. And one of the problems they have is that they have to go to 6 or 7 different state agencies and apply to be certified with DOT, Commerce, OGS.
Right, and there are different standards, and the Office of Contract Compliance is trying to put together one standard for certification. But that
It took 9 months, and you still haven't implemented it?
Oh, no, I'd rather it took 9 minutes. Am I surprised it took 9 months? No, of course not. It's the first time in history it was tried. Of course it's not going to be done overnight. Do I want perfection? Of course I do. Have we achieved it? No. Will we ever? No. Will you be able to say this 2 years from now? Yes. Are you pleased, Governor? No. I think.
If the ERA gets through with an anti-abortion amendment to it, would you rather have an ERA that way or no ERA?
It's not going to get through with the amendment. I'm sure if it gets to the floor, the amendment gets voted down.
Governor, a number of the participants in the
I want an ERA, plain and simple. I said it last night on television. I've said it 100 times. Why? Because there is no excuse for adulterating a proposition as simple as that. Women are equal to men, period. And vice versa. I got accused of not saying vice versa last night.
In some way, the Republicans might try to compromise in the Senate and pass it.
You can't compromise with it. Women are equal to men. How do you compromise?
So you'd oppose it if they attach that to
I
it?
want women are equal to men. I want the language of the amendment exactly the way it is.
Governor, speaking as a lawyer, could you describe your feelings of some of the interpretations of the ERA, such as...
Silly. We'll have a good... Silly. Silly. And that's what the best lawyers we can find in a hurry will say to you. Probably, yes, we're going to get them. I make a public offer now. Let all the lawyers who have a different point of view write me their briefs. And I'll read them and analyze them. We'll discuss them publicly. Let all the good lawyers in New York State who agree that in this, even in the Pennsylvania case, that there was a holding by a court that said that there was a relationship that was significant. Let them send me their briefs and we'll discuss it. On the other hand, you're going to hear from a lot of lawyers who will say exactly the opposite. Will say there is no relationship, this is silly.
Governor, a number of the members in the working group were a little bit displeased last week
After
the Senate decision, because some of them felt that your office had not exerted enough effort, and also some were upset at some of the statements that you made that were interpreted as a disclaimer of responsibility for the defeat. And I'm wondering, number one, how you feel about those two expressions of displeasure, and number two,
Well, I
have
do
you smoothed
disclaim
over
responsibility for the defeat, absolutely. I was not responsible for the vote in the Republican conference.
I believe the...
Yeah, so if the question is, are you responsible for losing in the Republican conference, the answer is no, I disclaim that. I blame the Republicans for that. If I could deliver the Republicans, Lerman would have more trouble than he figures.
My question is, have the differences or the displeasures that surfaced last week in the working group between your office and that group been
You have to ask
taken
them. I
care
had
of?
no differences, I had no displeasure. It was all theirs.
You want to say something, Maria?
Governor, the ERA
It's not important.
was before the Senate for about 6 months. There are only 35 Republican members of the Senate. Do you or anyone else here today have a count of the 35 where they stand? And if you do, could you share it with us?
I have a personal one which I won't share with you.
Does anybody else here have a count? I mean, I assume
I
over the
hope
last
if they
6 months
do, they
somebody
won't share
checked
it
with the
with
Senate to see where they stood.
It's within striking distance.
Anybody else want to say?
Hope not.
When you refer to a handful of senators who need to be talked to, whom are you talking about?
Pardon me?
You refer to a handful of senators. You said there's only a handful of senators we need to talk to.
Yeah.
Either who, by name, are you talking
I'd
about?
rather not.
Or,
I'd rather not.
well, are
I'd
you
rather
talking
not
about
discuss.
senators who are opposed or senators
Some
who
are opposed, some are not. Some are opinion leaders.
Last week or so at your last ERA press conference here, you said, I believe, and I'm roughly paraphrasing, it's not my bill, there is no bill, I don't even send a piece of paper from me to them.
That's exactly right, yeah. It wasn't my bill, and it isn't a bill. It's a resolution.
It's a resolution, right. And you might say it was a resolution. I don't even send a piece of paper from me to them. We were trying to minimize your role in that. I mean, isn't there in fact a resolution draft, a program bill that was called, that was sent by your office to them?
No, there's exactly the same language as the last time. Minimize my raising the issue, my putting it in the state of the state, my debating it with the national leaders of the women's groups who didn't want me to do it, my going to Washington and arguing with them that I was going to do it anyway, my making a pledge in 1982 and then coming and saying, despite the opposition of some women, I'm going to go forward with this. You're suggesting I'm minimizing it? No, I didn't minimize it. I was asked about a bill, and I said, it's not a bill, it's a resolution. I said, I don't even get to sign it. The point I was making is I don't feel responsible for losing in a Republican conference. And it's very important, if you want this passed, that be clear. The thing that was most regrettable about any sense that there wasn't complete unanimity on this side is it weakens our political position. It should be clear to everybody that politically everybody is on one side except a few people who are afraid of the conservative line in the Republican conference. It's very important. I want to keep the focus there. So when I'm asked, do you feel bad about having lost this thing? I take every opportunity to say, I didn't lose, it was the Republicans who did it. Why? Because if you can make that clear, it's going to be very difficult for the Republicans to keep that position. I'm sorry?
Didn't you in fact send a program bill, which
No, I don't understand the significance of the question. Can you tell me?
You said I didn't even send a piece of paper from myself to them.
Can you tell me what the significance of the question is so I'll know how to answer it? No, what is the significance of the question?
Were you mistaken last week when you said I didn't even
No, I was right when I said it's not a bill.
When you said I didn't send a piece of paper from no paper went from me to them. Was that?
I said no paper went or no bill went?
I believe both.
Well, when you find out, you let me know, Josh, and I'll discuss it with you, okay?
Governor, for about a month, there were strong indications that the ERA was in trouble in the Republican conference, that the combination of conservative pressure and right-to-life pressure was going to bring the vote that occurred. Do you feel at all responsible for not being more aware of that problem?
I was talking to Warren Anderson.
So you're saying that, are you saying that Warren Anderson misled you about what was
No, he didn't mislead me. Maybe he didn't know. But what we were doing at every leaders meeting is, how does it look, fellas? Looks great. Okay, thank you.
Have you made any inquiries beyond that?
No. You mean beyond Warren? No. Absolutely not. Why would I even suspect that Warren didn't know what was happening in his conference?
Governor, before the Assembly passed the ERA, Senator Anderson had told you at a leaders meeting there were what he called problems in his conference. That's at least a month ago. What action or did you take any action? Did you pass it on to
There was no action to take. He indicated at that time that he thought he could get it passed. Although there were some questions, and we discussed, as a matter of fact, I discussed the decision and how I would answer the objections. If you're asking, I mean, you're asking in many ways, do you feel there's something else you should have done? Obviously, if I had known there were problems, and Warren had known there were problems, and Warren said I got problems, and you should go talk to them the way he's saying it now, we would have done it a month ago.
In your subsequent discussions with Senator Anderson, did he maybe make any kind of recommendations as to which senators to sort of zero in on?
No, sir.
So concrete and specific as a conservative chairman's, thoughts given to an individual.
A constituency's thoughts.
Is that as specific as specific chairman?
Yeah, the chairman can't beat you on election day. The constituency can. And you're not elected to serve the chairman, you're elected to serve the constituency. I mean, that's relevant. It may not work, but it's good and specific and relevant.
Governor, are you willing to perhaps bargain one of your other program initiatives with the Republicans in exchange for the ERA?
Which one?
I don't know. I'm asking
No.
you.
I can't think of any, can you?
Okay.
It's not done that way. You don't say, oh, well, I'm hereby announcing that I will bargain one of my other positions with you if you're interested. We don't do it that way. First of all, we don't bargain. We compromise. I'm sorry.
Anything about this experience and the danger of having this put off for a lengthy amount of time that you'd want to propose a shortening of the time needed to enact a constitutional constitutional amendment, another constitutional
No,
amendment?
this is still a good process. This is still a good process. I think the point, I haven't looked at the legislative history, but the obvious point of this system is that on these fundamental questions, you want to get as much time and as much discussion as possible to get people a chance to be educated and to ventilate. So you make it be 2 legislatures instead of 1. You create time intervals before the election so that people have a chance to listen and to study. What we're saying now is perfectly consistent with that theme and that pattern. We're saying, good, let's discuss it. Nobody knows what we're talking about out there, unfortunately. If they did, this wouldn't be happening. If the state understood what was happening, it would not be happening. If the state understood that a small group of people was saying, we're afraid of a political leader, therefore we will not discuss this issue, it wouldn't happen. They'd be up here with placards, everybody would be marching, would say, what kind of government is this? What do you mean you won't discuss it? See, the problem is they don't know. And the problem is education. And somebody much wiser than most of us knew that, designed a constitution that says, hey, look, let's give them the fullest chance to communicate, especially in an age when they didn't have electronics. And so I like the design. Even with electronics, we need the time. No, I wouldn't be for constricting it. I am for using it a little bit better. And if I had known that, there was going to be any trouble, we could have been doing this for a couple of months. We didn't know. As I told you all, I regarded it as a non-event. There was nothing to campaign for this year. We were wrong.
Might there be another explanation that all the support that the polls show is actually very soft, and the people who say that they favor the ERA are not strongly enough in favor of it to come up here with placards and march and in indignation?
Are you saying, is that an explanation? I'm saying no. There's no explanation. What would you base that conclusion on? I mean, here, try it this way. Try it this way. Try it with your own poll. Try it anywhere. Go out in the street, in Albany, okay? Get 3 blocks away from the Capitol. Stop the first 15 people you find. So you know anything about the ERA? You know what's happened in the Capitol? Ask 15 people. If you get one who can describe what occurred other than a member of your family or the LCA, you let me know, I'll buy you dinner.
And when they give the answer that you expect them to give, if you follow up with that and say, what are you going to do about it, what do you think their answer to that would be?
When you say what? What are you going to do about what?
When they say, no, they're not aware of what occurred, and you inform them of what occurred, and then you ask them, what are you going to do about it? What do you think their answer would be?
Well, I don't know. I think if you told them, Julia X is your senator, and Julia X said that she doesn't believe this subject should be debated, even though there's every indication that the constituency wants to hear a debate on it, but Julia X says it's a personal risk to her politically, I think that person would say, well, then I am unhappy with Julia X, and I don't like that kind of behavior.
There are only 5 women in the Senate. Why this time do we have to use her as an example? Could I just add something? Can I put it?
I wouldn't even try to stop you.
In the year 1984, when we have had so much talk of a gender gap, of a woman on the national ticket, of the fact that more women vote than men, that there are more women in the country than there are men, the fact that you ask a question that the Senate is paying no attention because there haven't been mass rallies in the Capitol indicates, I think, a tragic thought. I mean, we are beyond that. We are now really trying to take over some of positions of power, and we're not now mobilizing, nor did we think we had to. And I think that speaking on behalf of women and on the Working Coalition, we're appalled by the lack of insight, understanding, and the progressive action on the part of the men in the Senate. And we didn't think we had to spend our energies marching when we've got energies that we have to spend so many other places, helping women who are going to try to find some kind of equality in employment, education, single parents. We have 800,000 families in this state headed by single women, and it's time that we paid more attention to those issues. And the Senate is really asking us to waste our time.
Last week, on a different matter, last week you...
Can we finish with this, Allison?
Okay.
Yeah.
Same issue. Some members of the working group have suggested that this whole effort has set back the push for a national ERA.
Who suggested that?
Well,
I don't accept the statement was made.
okay. I have heard around.
When you have somebody with that opinion, let them come forward, I'll discuss it with them. I don't want to discuss it on a hearsay basis.
Well, Governor, do you feel this has set back?
You'll back him up, Adam? Okay. Adam, who said it, Adam?
Competing media. I heard
Who said it, Adam?
People from two separate people.
People?
Who are members of the working group, who are prominent, intelligent people involved with the issue, who prefer to speak on it. You'll have to trust me. I really
Well, you have to
wouldn't
get
make it
to me.
up.
I'll tell you
I'm
what.
sure Josh
Let me tell Adam, let me tell you why it's relevant. Depending on who the people are, my objective would be to persuade them that they're wrong, right? But then I have to know what language they speak, how intelligent they are, what bias they have. How can I communicate to them? Now, I could, of course, deliver the message to you and hope you will accurately deliver it to them. I'd rather not try that. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
I will rephrase the question.
Please.
Even though I think that you should have accepted the premise versus debate.
Josh,
without
listen,
question.
Josh, that's what, when you become governor, you accept the premise.
Do you believe that this effort, if it fails, and it seems it's certainly in a dark hour right now.
Thank you,
will-
Josh. Yeah. You're doing an analysis of peace.
According to Republican sources.
According to Republican sources, says it's a dark hour. You can learn a lot listening to them.
Setback efforts for a national ERA or
That's very
maintenance,
flattering to
cast-
us.
cast-
That is very flattering. If you're telling me that the world is watching us in New York, and what happens here will make a difference, we accept that challenge. I would accept the challenge that says, if we can win this thing, it will help, and if you don't win, it doesn't help. Yes, I accept
In
that.
retrospect, it was a mistake for the governor to raise that issue over the objections.
I raised it in 1982, Josh. If it was a mistake, it was a mistake in 1982, and I pledged to do it.
Some of the women's groups suggested in
Which
January.
ones?
Suggested in January.
Which ones?
The ones you met
I
with
don't
in
accept the
January.
premise. Which ones? Okay.
There was a suggestion in January.
Since we've introduced some members of the task force, might we have enough?
Pardon me?
Could we talk to some of the members of the task force?
If they want to talk to you.
Maureen,
If they want to talk to you, sure.
I think we set it up. I'll answer a question.
what effect do you think the events of the last 6 months involving the New York State ERA have had on the national movement to achieve a national ERA?
I think that a lot of people are watching. A lot of states want to know what's going to happen in New York, and we've looked at other states and said 16 other states have done it, and we want it too. The effects for other states, I don't know.
Would it be easier to get back to the national efforts?
We're hoping not. We're still
You're hoping
pushing
not
up.
to have a defeat.
We're hoping not to have a defeat. We're confident that we are going to win in New York. We're hoping that we win in New York, and we are still pushing for a federal ERA as well.
Mike, I was in Washington with the governor when we met with the national groups. One of the reasons that they had some reservations about the state ERA was that their first primary consideration was to elect a Democratic president because they wanted to defeat the Republicans because they feel Republicans have been harmful to women. The Reagan cuts have affected too many women's lives, women and children. Certainly, what the Republican Senate working group has done here is an indication nationwide the importance of working in this election. If anything, we have, I think, highlighted what's going to happen with the ERA. The ERA is not going to get passed nationally unless there's a Democratic president. We have a Republican president who's opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment, and we're now following that with a Republican conference here that seemed to be in agreement with the Republican president. So if anything, New York State is giving the country a message, and that is for them to get out to work for the Democrats so we can have an ERA.
Mike, there's another part of it. Here in 1982, I'm endorsed by now. I was the first male to be endorsed by now. As part of that, I gave them a platform. And I said, one thing I will do is push for a state ERA. And now the question comes up, are you really going to do it? And I say yes. And some people say, yeah, but you might lose. Okay, here's one alternative. I'm going to withdraw that commitment. Why? Because in New York State, I think we'll lose. Would that help the national cause? I don't think so. Would that help the cause in this state? I don't think so. For the governor to announce, yes, I did make the pledge, but now I'm afraid in my state it won't win. Now, and in addition to that analysis, you have this, the legislative leadership that says, no problem. It goes, sails through both houses. So now you made a commitment, you're a progressive state, you're a strong state, you've been all around it, you know that the people want it in your judgment, you can never tell for sure until they vote. The legislative leadership tells you it's a go, everybody encourages you, at that point to say, but what if we lose? You know, I think the judgment was exactly correct. Again, it was made in 1982, and I see no reason to have changed it. Now, I think the point Ronnie made is very important. As part of the explanation here is the tie-in to the presidential election. Ronald Reagan runs at the top of the ticket here in November. He's running against the ERA. That's a very important part of his platform. What the Republicans are trying to do is get themselves into sync with it, because they don't want to embarrass him. And that's another part of it. They don't want to have an election in November where the president is saying ERA is bad, and they're saying, yeah, but we voted for a state ERA. So it has a lot of national implications. I think, frankly, it's a fight you must make. I mean, I think it's a fight you must make. It's a fight that is very important to win, but it's a fight that you must make. I don't see how you not make it on the grounds it's more prudent to run away from this part of the Ten Commandments. We're afraid of it. We're afraid to discuss it. We might lose. Now, that's what I said in Washington, and that's what I've continued to say. I think eventually we'll win.
Governor, given the publicity to Phyllis Schlafly and all the others who've had
Phyllis
Schlafly, excuse me.
Yeah.
Who've had varying interpretations of, she's the, let's call her the anti-ERA spokesman of the country, and others who've had
spokesperson.
She is most likely a spokesman, you're right.
With all the varying interpretations of the ERA, apparently those you disagree with, do you think it's polluted the issue to the point where the average Joe or Josephine on the street doesn't understand? It's just how simple a statement and a simple concept that the ERA is. Do you think that's been clouded, that most people don't understand it's simply one sentence?
Well, I'd hesitate to say most people, but are a lot of people confused? Of course, that's why it lost last time, because they really did believe it's going to be a man and a woman in the bathroom together. They really did. That stuff worked. And the national women were concerned about that. I must tell you what they said to me when Ronnie and I went down was, look, we saw all the money they spent in your gubernatorial race. They can produce the same money for the ERA. They'll put commercials up there that say, show two people walking into the same toilet. And you won't have the money to prove that that's not the way it works. They'll show a commercial that says that the women are going to be disadvantaged in the matrimonial courts. And you won't have the money to show that that's not the way it works. You know, the wonderful thing that Linda Winnico and Karen Burstein did in the Senate the last time they discussed the ERA, you really ought to get the transcript. It was wonderful. I think Karen got up and Linda put the questions to her. Is it true, Senator, that there'll be two people in a toilet? And then she gave the answer. It was a very intelligent answer. But it must have taken them 15 minutes. So the problem is education. If you're asking me, do the people out there understand the ERA? I tell you, regrettably, the answer is not as well as they should. They know it's right. They know it's basically right, but they are subject to being confused in an election. And that was one of the great threats to us here. We won't have the money, felt the women, that the opponents might have. Now, that's also true of the death penalty, in my opinion. It's true of a lot of things, in my opinion. It's true of welfare programs. There are still people in this state who think welfare is largely a lot of strong, capable males refusing to work. And when you say to them, it's basically women, or dominantly women, who would love to work but can't for there's a lot of people who don't understand that. So there's nothing unusual about the confusion, and it affects us here as it affects us in a lot of places.
Did Senator Anderson indicate that he thought you had any kind of a good chance at
He did. Rich, to be as precise as I can, the Senator's communication is always excellent and unadorned. He said nothing about who's voting, how, whether you can change their minds. He was very plain about it. His own position has never changed. He respects his conference. His conference didn't want to vote on it for various reasons. He didn't lay out the reasons for me. He didn't deny anything I'm saying, nor did he endorse it. He said he would not go back to the conference now and say, please consider it again, because, that would be disrespectful to them, that they would have to come to him and say, Warren, we want to take it up again. And I think that's a fair position. He also said he understands that we'll be communicating with the senators, and he has no problem with it.
Just discuss at your breakfast this morning. And did you
I
make
want
any-
to do all the ERA if we can, okay? First, Lisa, I'll stay, but I want to make sure so we don't have to hold all these people. Anything else on ERA?
Are there any Republicans who are going to join you in this lobbying campaign from the Senate to help you
That's a good
swing
question.
votes?
I don't. Do we have any who are willing to lobby?
I'm sorry?
Any
We have,
Republicans? I think
you mean Republican members or Republicans? I don't know about the Republican senators. I don't think we have any, but after the weekend, we hope to have some.
Republican women?
No, Republican
senators. We have many Republicans, men and women within the party, who are distressed at the direction of their party. We'd like to remind you that there are 16 states that already have ERAs, so that some of these tales of horror have been proven incorrect in any of those 16 states. And if you would like to refer to them, we'll tell you more detail later. Do you want to say one thing on that?
I'd like to say one other thing, and that is very incumbent upon every citizen in New York State at this time to create a big brouhaha this weekend and to let every Republican senator know that this is our prime issue for the weekend.
Wait till next week.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're finished from the beginning with these guys. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, good work. Good work. We'll be talking to you. It's over. Stand up and say, thank you, Governor.
I think I'm kidding. That's the first one.
Was Maureen there? She missed this
She
one.
missed it, but I'm telling you, get the helicopters next. I feel it. Barbara just ran in with this. It's a telephone. I never made it where they just caught him. It's unbelievable.
All lobbyists in the lobby. No lobbying in the courtroom. Okay, go ahead. Are these off now? Go ahead, yeah.
Or having Jerry Crotty look into whether any PSC. Yeah. Last week you said you were looking into the PSC's, unidentified PSC members' comments about the Shoreham rate case. What have you decided anything about whether this
Not
actually-
yet, Allison. No,
Do you
we're
have-
still, no, I've had a number of discussions about it. We're doing some legal research. I made some comments about it to the cabinet yesterday at a meeting. I made some comments about it to the leaders today, all the comments being essentially the same. What I said to the press is what I've been saying to everyone else, and that is, it seems to me inappropriate, seems to me wrong, and I'm waiting for Jerry Crotty to get back to me with a legal memorandum that tells me what he thinks are the implications and what he recommends we ought to be doing legally. But I think surely something has to be done. I don't know exactly what. Josh?
Just discuss press relations with your cabinet? I mean,
Press relations?
Just in the context of what cabinet membership should be saying to the press or something? Or was it just a separate issue about the PSC?
I never discussed with my cabinet what they should be saying to the press. I did say one thing yesterday about relationships with the outside world. This was addressed to the cabinet. I said I thought that I had I was benefited with a very, very strong cabinet. I was not sure that people knew my cabinet people as well as they should, the public at large, but they did get to see them a little bit in the bond issue because they were encouraged to go out, and they did. I'd like them to continue that. I'd like them to get as much exposure as possible. I'd like them to talk as much as possible through the media with the people. And, pardon me?
Use their names?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, you said you'd like them to talk to media. Is it okay if we quote them by name?
I really don't understand the question.
Well, I think that's part of the controversy over the PSC thing, whether or not we can talk to people.
Lisa, I think you don't understand after all these discussions.
No, I do understand your
No,
point.
you don't,
But I
because
also
I've
think
said just the opposite a number of times. Of course they're free. The problem with the PSC, Lisa, is that these people are judges, quasi-judicial officers, who are not supposed to announce opinions in advance. I'm not talking about their criticism of the government, their casual statements. That's all fine. They can do all of that they want. Every day I read about unnamed aides and people close to the governor. I've read about more people close to the governor than there are people close to the governor. But, so that's all right. That's not going to be stopped, and I don't know what you'd do if we ever stopped it. So I'm not complaining about that, nor have I ever. Nor have I ever said to the cabinet they oughtn't to do it. What I'm saying just the opposite, as a matter of fact. I'm telling them to get more exposure. Now, with the PSC, Lisa, the problem is you quoted people as announcing their decisions, and I'm sure you're accurate. But if you're accurate, they're wrong. Period. That's not a matter of policy. That's a matter of rule and ethic. Yes.
These are quasi-judicial positions. This isn't the Court of Appeals we're talking about. There are laws that are going to govern them and their decisions, and I think that none of that was really all that out of line, was it, when we think about it?
Well, then you've resolved it. That's fine. Well, I'll tell you something. No, I'll tell you, you're way ahead of me. You really are. You have analyzed it, studied it, and concluded. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's good. Well, that's your conclusion. That's obviously not mine. We're still studying it.
But you obviously have reached a decision that you do think it's out of line.
Well, I've said that over and over, yeah. No, what's your question?
I guess why is that really out of line? These are
Okay, let's start again. All right, we'll stay.
Positions.
All right, why is it out of line? Okay, it's out of line because the design of the law is as follows. We appoint you 7 people, in this case 6 left, to make a judgment on very important questions. This question, whether millions of people are going to pay $4 billion for a mistake. You know, pay it in rates that will drive businesses out, hurt middle-class people, and devastate poor people. That's what's at stake. Let's stay with it, please. Now, we have, by law, selected people to make the judgment. Now, how do you make that judgment? Do you go up on a mountain and pray? No. You have a hearing. What is a hearing? A hearing is both sides come in, and we use the ancient method for this country, which is combat, controversy, intellectual. All right? It's called the adversary system. And the way it works is one side comes in, tells its story, you're allowed to contradict it. The other side comes in, tells its story. It all goes in pictures, statistics, expert testimony, cases, legal opinions from the Attorney General. Okay. You tell all the people of this state that they have that opportunity to be heard. Okay? Then you go in and you have the hearing. After the hearing, ladies and gentlemen, you study the evidence, you give us an honest conclusion. What happened here is that 1, 2, 3 people, I don't know, and I'm not asking Lisa, obviously, but people say, there is no alternative here. The law is clearly as follows, doesn't have to be used and useful, and a rate increase is inevitable. You mean before you read the briefs? Yes. How do you know this? We know it from the past. Well, then what is the purpose of the hearing? Well, we're not really judicial. We're not the Court of Appeals. Then why are you having a hearing? What is the Attorney General doing there with his brief? What is Richie Kessel doing there? Why are we lying to all these people, telling them they have a hearing at the PSC? Why the evidence? I mean, to suggest that you don't see how it's wrong means that the people of the state, if they're like you, misunderstand totally how the process works.
law, aren't we playing a shell game with the people in many instances when it comes to utility rate making?
Now, within the confines of the law, aren't we playing a shell game? I don't now, please, it's not you, it's me, I'm sure. Of course, I understood you at the show. I don't know what you mean by a shell game. I really don't.
Mean, is a hearing almost unneeded, because within the confines of the law, you can't confiscate private property. You're going to have to find all you're going to have to do is find the level in between there. If not, why introduce bills, for example, to change the way rate making is made? I mean, if you have a
I didn't introduce a bill to change the way rate making is made. I introduced a bill to clarify the law, which I thought was being misunderstood. And I was very precise about that. See, I said, hey, this is the law. I have a memorandum. Says it should be used and useful. What happened in Sterling? They were wrong. And Bob Abrams would have won that case if it weren't for the statute of limitations. That's my judgment. Okay? And I said, so to clarify, especially now that I see people being quoted saying they're committed to that error, we'd better pass a statute that cleans it up right away. Of course, they apparently are a little bit confused about the law. No, it's not a shell game. Take the imprudency proceeding. Is it a shell game, whether it's going to be $200 million? Lilco wanted to make a deal, $250 million imprudent. I don't know what the staff says. Allison knows. 1.9 billion. What was the number in the staff? 1.9 billion. Is that a shell game? And how will they decide between 1.9 billion and 250 million, or 2 billion or 3 billion? On the evidence that they get at that hearing, which you can hear and contradict. Look, when they start making the judgments, and you know what happens next? All kinds of bad things. If you leave it just to the commissioners to do by themselves, that's an awful system. An awful system. We don't have that system. We have a system of proof. Now, in early days we had it when rate making was legislative. But now it's not like that anymore. Now you have a whole system of hearings, and you tell the people they're going to be heard, and you tell them the Attorney General is going to represent them, and you give them the right to appeal in an Article 78 proceeding. No, no. If you're suggesting, oh, Governor, come on, this happens all the time. If it does, it's wrong all the time.
The purpose of Jerry's study, investigation?
To tell me, you know, what the cases say about reviewability, about extra forum statements, what effect that has on the proceeding. Does it create a disqualification? Does it mean that that person ought not to be allowed to sit on the hearing? That really is one of the, you know, obviously that's one that's very close to the center of things for me. What about your capacity to, you know, if you announce, whenever you're in doubt about, and one umpire did, I think, Russell would probably know, whenever you're in doubt about whether it's a ball or a strike, if it's Ted Williams at bat, you call it a ball because he wouldn't let it go by if it were a good pitch. That's the umpire. He says, you know, whenever I'm in doubt, if it's Williams at the plate and he let it go, it must be a ball. Why? Because he's got the eyesight 1 in 20 million. Somebody wrote an article when he was a pilot, his eyesight was 1 in 20 million. He had a better eyesight than anybody. So this umpire says, if he lets it go, it must be a ball. Because he would never let a strike go past. How can you let him umpire the game?
Could you appoint into the PSC someone who says, I'll never vote for a utility rate increase?
Could you appoint to the...
The person who says that?
Could you? Probably. Should you? Of course not. Of course not. That's, you know, Gail Schwartz's name is up. I never spoke to her. I never asked her, what is your position on Lilco? I did study very carefully her background and economics, etc. I don't ask. Paul Joya is still sitting there as chairman. I didn't call him in and say, how do you see this thing, Paul? Or I didn't say, what maybe I should have thought of saying, why don't you go have an interview with Lisa? You don't have to use your name. Just let me know what you're thinking here, Paul. You know, it's perfectly all right because the other guys are doing it. Just let Lisa know. This way I'll read the paper, then I'll know where you are, and then I'll know whether to dump you or not. It's not a bad... Lisa, did you do, Paul?
Ascertain what, you know, kind of philosophy they're going to be bringing to
the same way you do with the Court of
Commission.
Appeals.
How are you going to know that they're going to be
Same
carrying
way you
out
do
your...
with the Court of Appeals. Judith Kay. I didn't ask Judith. I'll tell you something. I don't know. Who was that? Timmy, Mike? Did we know Simons was Republican?
Yes.
See, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. See, that's the first thing. Okay. Anyway, I didn't know. All right. But the point is, and this is important, because now you face two of the most important judgments a governor has to make in these 4 years. Chief Judge of the Court